Hello, everyone. Everyone, can I get your attention, please? Hey, so welcome to the Women's Studies Center. My name is Bede, and I'm the Information and Technology intern. This is the last time you'll hear from me. I know you heard from me last week, but it'll be done, I promise. So first off, say hi to everyone. So the people sitting next to you, just give them a welcome and thank them for being here. Okay, so we wanted to recognize that we are on occupied land. This is Kanin Onshani land. So just take a moment to silence for that. So we are going to have the sign-up sheet for the Women's Studies outreach going around. So if you're not currently registered, just write your email if you want to get our notifications. Today at 4:15 in Lawrence 105, there is Women's Professor Simonson will be delivering an Arts and Humanities Colloquium, and it's on Sounding the Silent Screen, Stages, Prologues, Fade-ins, and Interludes in American Silent Cinema. So then there's Art Fest this Saturday at Bunch House from 2 to 6. Make sure to stop by. Next week, our brown bag is Unpacking the Feminist Ethics of Study Abroad, with senior WIMS concentrators who have returned from being abroad themselves. So general protocol, sorry. So if you ever have to leave, just be mindful to be respectful and not make too much noise. When you're done, please clean up around you. When we're done with the chairs, if you can stack your own, that would be great. And again, thank you all for being here. So I'm actually really excited to introduce a lot of my close friends today. Today, LASO, the Latin American Student Organization, is helping us kick off Hispanic Heritage Month. And if you all want more information on the events, they're all right here on the calendar. If you're not signed up for Women's Outreach, it'll be there too. So make sure to sign up.
All right, thank you so much, Bede. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Veronica, or Beto, but it's fine. As Bede said, we're kicking off Hispanic Heritage Month. There's going to be a whole bunch of awesome events that our core has worked really, really hard to bring to you, from comedians to cultural movement leaders. So keep an eye out for that. Sign up for LASO emails if you're interested, or come take a look at this awesome banner and show up and support. So the format for today's panel is pretty informal. We're just going to pass the mic around. I'm going to facilitate and ask a series of questions, and our panel members can kind of take it whatever direction they want to go in. So before I get started, I just want to thank WIMS for letting us be in this space. I want to thank our panel members for having the courage to get up here and talk about personal experiences. So thank you guys so much. Give them a round of applause, please. All right, with that, I would like to get started. So first, I'm just going to sit here because I don't want to stand in front of, that means block their view. So I just want you all to introduce yourselves and explain how you identify, whatever that means to you, whatever your own personal identity is. So we're going to start over here.
My name too?
Yep.
I'm Kevin, everyone, senior, and I identify as Latino.
I'm Roxanne. I'm also a senior, and I identify as Latina, specifically Dominican and Curaçaoan.
I'm Benny. I'm a senior. I'm also LASO's current president, and I identify as Latino, Hispanic, Chicano, Tejano, queer, also thrown in there somewhere. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Avelina, also senior. I am Afro-Latina, ethnically Dominican.
I'm Alicia. I'm a sophomore. I identify as mixed, but ethnically African American, Trinidadian, Colombian, and Puerto Rican.
My name is Tabitha. I am a sophomore and I identify as Puerto Rican American and also Colombian.
So, if you could take a moment to kind of explain if any of your other identifications as woman or as queer, whatever that may be, conflicts with your identification as Latinx. So, yeah, pass the mic to everyone.
So yeah, hi. So I identify as Hispanic, Chicano, Latino, queer, Tejano. I throw a lot of identifications in there because it's really complicated. Um, Terms like Hispanic, Chicano, Latino, even just Mexican get thrown around very often, and they're kind of similar and they have like connecting threads, but they're not necessarily the same. So whenever I say stuff like that, I always kind of think it's kind of funny because the Chicano side of me kind of conflicts with the Tejano side. For those of you who don't know, Tejano is basically like a Latino from Texas, but there's like more, like it's a complicated, rich kind of thing that I don't want to go too into. But it's kind of interesting when you like say like, oh, I'm a Texan, but I'm also Latino. Like those two things don't necessarily blend well all the time. Like when you think Texas, you think like cowboy boots, patriotic, Republican, 75 American flags in the front yard, like rides horses everywhere. We don't have 75, we have 74. Okay. But like when those things kind of conflict with like my Latino identity, it gets really interesting because it's like so funny. So I'm from San Antonio, Texas. One important thing is is the Alamo, which is where is of like one of the most important battles in the Texas Mexican American War, and it's like interesting because you see like Latinos who love the Alamo, who are like from Mexico, love the Alamo. So like that's like one of those contentions like that's kind of weird. It's like interesting because like you're Mexican, but you love Texas, but you love America because they want, but you don't like them because you're Mexican. It's like so weird and complicated. But I think that's just like one in particular way that my identity kind of blends and kind of mixes together. So
Yeah, also with me, like, I'm ethnically Salvadorian, I forgot to mention that. And another aspect to it is also, I guess, being like first generation and from like an immigrant family. So a lot of the times, my queer identity also gets like labeled as Americanized, and me just being more American and therefore less Latino and less Salvadorian. And so that's kind of like it's kind of like a struggle in the household where you want to be able to prove your identity and yet you don't feel like you're American, you don't feel like you're Latino, you don't feel like you're either, yet you still are. So it's like it's kind of like a tension being like not having a home but being born at the crossroads. So I think that's also something that's really difficult to grapple with and something that a lot of like families that have to understand different sexualities find a disconnect with. So it's something that's like an ongoing issue as well.
Okay, I'll say a little something. I'm originally I was born in Curaçao, which is a Dutch Caribbean island right next to Aruba, and I find it difficult sometimes, just like logistically, like filling out like applications or like census, blah blah blah, like only checking Latina and not be like if I check multiracial or biracial, it's like they don't really know where to categorize me. And in my daily life, it's kind of difficult to just have people believe sometimes that I'm Latina because, the stereotype, as you guys can see, we're a very broad range of people from very different places. So Latinos are basically just people who have been colonized under Spain or Portugal in the case of Brazil. So we're a huge range of people, and in the media, and sometimes even in our education systems, we only learn about one type of Latino. So yeah, that's something that I kind of grapple with as a Latina as well.
I kind of feel the same way. Being mixed, people just, want to say I'm the black girl. I'm not Latina at all. But like you said, like we come in all shapes, colors, sizes. But it's kind of hard to grapple with identifying as Latina when you don't look what they stereotypically look like.
So kind of going off of like identity and concept of identity, do any of you, do all of you, I don't know, identify as feminists? And can you kind of talk about like intersection with like a feminist perspective, as well as how that might go well with or conflict with like Latino background and culture? I know that's kind of a tough question.
So I would like to identify as feminist, and it could be really difficult within a Latino perspective because something that's really prevalent in Latino culture is the idea of machismo, and that it's basically like pride and masculinity. I don't know if anyone wants to. I don't know. It's on dictionary. So like it's basically that. So. And especially, I see it within my community, my own household at home, and it could be really difficult to have that identity and also try to stay true to my culture, I guess. So that's a little difficult.
Like I said before, I'm Dominican, and it's really difficult being feminist at home. I don't know if any of you have seen like Dominican like popular music, like Pinball is like a really popular genre, and usually they'll be like half naked women like dancing around. There's like no respect, and it's hard to go home and say, I'm a college student, and I'm about to graduate and all this, and also like be Latina, because it's like I guess question like what, like you're about to graduate school and stuff, like it's hard to deal with all the identities.
Yeah, I do identify as a feminist, and I agree a lot with what people have said that you see a lot of like hyper masculinity, or I don't even know if you call it hyper masculinity. It's just like a special form of masculinity because machismo is like very weird. Like me and Abdel have talked about this before, like how some guys like they dress kind of like they like take care of themselves really really well, and then like they look like it's like okay. Like you take care of yourself, like that's too much for like a normal like American man. Like the American man is like rugged and more tough and stuff. But with machismo, it like blends a little bit more, which is kind of interesting. So you definitely see a lot of that. I think for me, it may be slightly different just because like I come from a matriarchy in my family. Like I don't know what's special about my family, but like the women have been like the center pillar, and that's just kind of what happened. But I think that's also too because like I have I don't know how far like in terms of immigration generation I am. I'm sorry, I just realized that rhymed. That's not kind of cool. But like I don't know how like because like some people can say like I'm first or I'm second or I'm third, and they can kind of define that however they want. But for me, I'm just like I don't know where I fall because like my mom is from here, my grandma's from here, I think my great grandma's from here, and I think by that point it's like unclear what's Mexico and what's the U.S. anymore. So it's like, what does that mean? But I think that also kind of gets back to what Ken was saying, like how like sometimes you are seen as like more American or more white and not Latino, which is kind of like really kind of fucked up, but it is kind of what it is. And I think just going back to the feminist thing, I think the reason I identify as feminist is because like I want to challenge that notion and kind of push against that and say like, yes, as Latinos we can do this.
Well, it's definitely like well, of course, yeah, I'm a feminist. First of all. But I guess it's also like it's like difficult to reconcile how El Salvador, for example, has like one of the highest rates of like femicide in the world, yet you still want to have pride and like pride in you being from where you are. So it's kind of difficult to be able to like um, reconcile these 2 points that are kind of like in contrast to each other. And so this also like ties into like every facet of like an individual's life because like it's all dependent on like context and where you are because like in some Latin American countries like taking care of yourself like having clean cut shaves like doing your eyebrows is all seen as like what the typical masculine man would do, yet in other cultures it's seen as like what a feminized guy would do, and that's seen as gay. So it's interesting to see how like that's what that and that this goes back to what Benny was saying. Like it's just like machismo has so many fissures within itself that there's no consistency to ever be the ideal man. It's just like it's just like an individual trying to achieve this like this image of a man that's unachievable because no matter where you are or what you do, there's always it's it's commonplace to always point to one of your to an action that you do, a hand gesture that you do, the tone of voice that you use as oh you're gay, you're being gay right now, and so that's seen as something that's negative. So it's kind of like a back and forth between like wanting to identify like no it is possible to be like care about like feminist issues, queer issues, and still be Latino inside of a space that doesn't really accept that and doesn't think that it's old and that it's boring.
I'd like to talk about terms for a second if we can. So there's Latino, Latina, Latinx, Chicano, Chicana, Hispanic. So if you could give kind of your personal opinion on what you prefer, why, maybe define a couple terms.
Well, I'm not a dictionary, but for me, I prefer to identify as Latino because that connects me more to what Latin America is, and that includes like all the countries that have been colonized throughout various colonizers throughout the Americas, and I feel like there's like a certain like connected lived experience and culture that we can all understand each other with in that regard. And for me, Hispanic, when I really thought about what this term means to me, I've slowly realized that it's more of like it connects more to the Spanish speaking part of Latin America, and that to me connects us more to the colonizers of Spain. And I realized like it's a kind of a point of contention too, where I just feel like I want to be identified. I want to identify not in relativity to what my history has been in its negative regards, but to what I want to be able to be in the future. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, and kind of going off of that, I think while we think of the term when we think of the term Latino, we usually think of people who speak Spanish, but like Kevin said, in reality, Latino is like all of Latin America and the countries that were colonized there. So that includes Brazil, that includes Guyana, and those are usually countries that we neglect to include in this really broad category that we have. Which is why I also choose to kind of identify myself as Latina or Latinx. And Latinx kind of refers to like non-gender binary category if people want to identify as that. And like you said, Hispanic is more kind of connecting yourself with Spain and its language specifically, and that's not all that Latinos are.
Well, like I said earlier, I identify as Afro-Latina because a lot of the times, like, Blackness is trying to be erased from the Latino identity, and especially coming from the Dominican Republic, it's a really big issue. So I always like to add that on because we're not just from Spain, like, we're not Spaniard descendants. We also have indigenous roots, we also have African roots, we also have, Hispanic roots. So.
I definitely prefer the term Latina, like in my household. The word Hispanic, like my mother kind of discourages discourage that word because it is so your assumption. That's how everyone was saying like the word Latino and Latinx even more kind of includes everyone altogether. So I prefer that word.
I also prefer the term Latina to Hispanic because, like, Benny was saying, or Kevin was saying, Hispanic for me relates more to Spain and the language Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish, so it kind of makes me feel disconnected. So I would prefer to be referred to as Latina.
So I low-key am a dictionary sometimes because like no, just because like I've looked because like a few years ago I was working with this organization and it's a debate team and this was one of the issues that was brought up like what do these terms mean and how do we kind of wrestle with those ideas and kind of also move forward. So Latino and Hispanic are pretty clear cut as through what everybody said. Hispanic refers to anywhere that's been colonized or kind of like has Spanish influence. So even places like, you know, Spain is considered Hispanic. They are Hispanic, that's for sure. The Philippines, which are Hispanic, are definitely part of that because they have Spanish influence there. And so, like, that's a broader term. And Latin America, Latino or Latinx, also has to do with Latin America. And that kind of, it's not just, when I say Latin America too, it's not just like South America, it's like South, Central, Caribbean, and me personally, I consider North America because it's like, why the fuck not? Like, why is that like invisible Mexico border? Like, oh, if you're below this, you're Latino. I mean, yeah, if you're Latin America, like that just doesn't make sense to me. Some other terms, Tejano, which I kind of explained, refers to like Mexicans or like Latinos in Texas. Chicano is the term that came, I believe, from like the civil rights 60s, 70s era. And it kind of refers primarily to Latinos of Mexican descent. And it's related. I don't know the exact history of this word because it's kind of been taken away from us. We'll talk about that later. But it primarily refers to Mexican Americans in the Southwest area, primarily like Texas and primarily actually California. And I think it has a lot, that term also has a lot to do with like reclaiming land and reclaiming power. So Latino, like I want to point out too that these words are similar, but they're definitely not the same. And like to categorize, and also one thing too, a lot of these words were not created by Latinos. Like they like I don't remember if this, I don't know if it's accurate or true, but I want to believe it's true because it seems plausible that the term Hispanic wasn't really created by Latino or Hispanic people. It was created by like Nixon or someone like Oh, Reagan. It was created by like Reagan to like identify this like term of people that like they couldn't like, they didn't know what to call them because we all look so different, but like they want to like group them all together. So that's kind of like the history of that word and kind of, you know, these are important things to kind of understand. That was a little long, I'm sorry.
That's great.
So I want to talk about cultural appropriation for a second. Does anybody have, I just want to throw out that term, and if anyone has any like particular strong response to that, then go for it. You can take that to wherever you want to take it. If not, like I can ask more specific questions.
I'll take it. I'll fight the beast. So cultural appropriation, as like any other culture in the world, cultural appropriation occurs when a dominant group, a dominant culture, comes in, takes an icon, a symbol, a dance, some kind of aspect of culture, and kind of puts it into their mainstream without necessarily supporting that with the historical, cultural, educational, like explaining what those things mean, and kind of saying like, hey, these things, like, yeah, they're cool, they're pretty, but they have so much more meaning. One thing I get on about constantly is the Calavera and Day of the Dead, because I remember like a few years ago, Disneyland or Disney was trying to like buy the rights to Day of the Dead, and I was like, how the fuck are you gonna try? Like, how are you gonna buy the rights to a holiday and like use that to like promote your own stuff and like I'm doing this from a Mexican American standpoint. So if anybody else wants to jump in on that, Like there are definitely other things, but I definitely think it's like taking those aspects and like making them into pretty shirts or making them into pretty symbols and kind of parading them without understanding the cultural and the rich historical thing and the way that it's actually a form of resistance because a lot of these symbols are forms of resistance and yeah, if anybody else wants to jump in.
Well, when she said that, I immediately thought to tourism and the Dominican Republic and like how I had gone, like I think 2 years ago, I'd gone to. Don't ever go to Punta Cana. It's just like a part of the country that's no longer Dominican. I'd like to say, and it's terrible because you're like on the island and they appropriate our culture. Like they'll be dancing on music, but they'll add like Justin Bieber song. Like they'll do like a remix of it with our beats. And the women will dress in our traditional dresses just to like show, the tourists, oh, look how pretty we are and welcome to DR and this is all that we are. And it's just, gets me really angry and how I come here and I hear people that aren't, who know nothing, no knowledge of where I come from and they'll be like, oh yeah, I've heard of DR, like is it great? Like all my friends are coming here to go to Punta Cana, like it's really fun. And it's just like very frustrating to see that and it's just like it keeps getting developed and like more like ads on television about it and yeah.
So jumping more specifically now to Colgate and being a Latinx at Colgate, has your experience as a student here made you more aware of your identity in a way that you weren't before?
Hell yeah. I live in Lawrence, Massachusetts. It's predominantly Puerto Rican and Dominican. I was very sheltered before coming to Colgate, and I've never felt more Latina in my life. In actuality, I didn't even know that much about other Latino identities. Like, I remember my best friend was actually Ecuadorian, mentioning to me, like, oh, do you listen to Romeo Santos? And I was like, you know who he is? Yeah, so I don't know. It's also this like identity struggle. So at Colgate, I feel very, very Latina, but at home, I don't feel that Latina. Like, especially because I'm lighter skinned. So when I go home, I get questioned a lot. Like, oh, you're Puerto Rican. Oh, you're Salvadorian. You're Mexican. You're something else, but you're not Dominican because you're light skinned and because of your hair and because of your physical features. And it's like, no, I'm Dominican. And here on campus, it's like it's very evident. Oh, she's obviously foreign, like or Hispanic or something. So it's a struggle. And also to add on to that education, like I'll go home and just because people know that I'm going to college, like I'm already more Americanized and I'm less Latina, I'm less Dominican, I'm less part of the community. And like my dad owns a bodega and I'll work with him sometimes and like people will know because he talks, he likes to show off like in college and stuff. And they'll look at me and they'll question like, does she know Spanish? And I'll be like, really? So yeah, that's all I have to say.
My response is hell yeah too. It's funny. I've also heard this from a lot of other POCs on campus, also people of color, and they were telling it would just be funny because I also had like a similar experience to Upgrade where like my home was like 90% Salvadorians and like that's pretty much I took that for granted and I was like okay well everyone knows what this is and this is like this is the whole country and everyone's knowledgeable and suddenly, I came here and even like my Dominican friend Abril over here was like I was like have you ever had a pupusa? She's like what is that? And I was like apparently like that's like a dish of my country and it would just be even worse like with people who didn't even know where like El Salvador was on a map or like where or what countries were in Latin America and so it would just be more it would especially be like but what's so striking about it is how it's so subconscious sometimes where I remember I would be in Curtis during my first year and when I would be on the phone with my parents and when I would see other like non-people of color who would walk around, I would feel nervous about speaking Spanish and speaking so loudly, and I would like kind of like auto like police myself into like controlling or like stopping or not like putting it so out there, because for whatever reason I felt like that was to be shameful of. And then as like the semesters continued and I started like being involved in like a lot of these like Alana organizations and like brown bags and meetings and discussions with friends and taking classes, like I started to like to really develop like an understanding of my identity, like a language to be able to speak it with, and really be able to grow comfortable in my own skin and with who I am. So it's definitely been like a journey where at this point I really don't give a about what other people think, and I kind of like it's kind of like when especially when I'm in these spaces like Colgate, like it kind of like I kind of feel like the need to pull it out even more as like to be able to like just out of spite of to what this campus represents.
So growing up, I didn't really speak Spanish at all. I was in my household. My mom, she spoke Spanish to us all the time, but you know, we were in America. We went to English-speaking schools, etc. So we didn't really find a need to answer back in Spanish. So I kind of didn't at all, and I kind of like felt alienated in my largely Dominican community. Everybody spoke Spanish, and I just felt completely out of place. And then in high school, I went to boarding school, and I felt that as a Latina, I couldn't really identify as one because I didn't speak Spanish. That was like my basis for it, and I didn't look like one, so I'm like, no one's gonna ask me anyways. So I kind of they didn't. So I blended in, and I just didn't like speak about any part of my culture. I wasn't from Curaçao. I wasn't from DR. I was just like, you know, I try to blend in as African American, and that's kind of stupid. But and I wasn't happy obviously because you know I wasn't being who I was. And coming to Colgate, getting into Lasso, and like learning about all these different Latino cultures around me, yeah, it really helped me develop like a better understanding of who I am and be proud that I am like Latina. I'm from Curaçao as well. I'm like, yeah, that's all.
So to speak more on kind of like my personal relationship with the Spanish language, which does not exist really. So I don't speak Spanish, and when you think of I guess stereotypical Latinx person, you think of someone that does speak Spanish, and because of that, throughout like most of my life, people have assumed that I spoke Spanish, and it put me in a bunch of difficult positions. Like, first of all, when I went to high school, they put me. You had to take a language in high school, and you had to take Spanish, whether it's like it's split into native and non-native Spanish class. So they automatically put me in the native class, and I'm like, but like I don't speak Spanish, so I struggled throughout my entire freshman year in that class. I mean, I ended up doing pretty well, but that's besides the point. And then in my junior year, I had an internship at an elementary school, my old elementary school, and for a first grade teacher. And right before I walked into the class, the lady that was placing me, she's like, "You speak Spanish, right?" And I'm like, "No." And she's like, "This is an ASL class," and I'm like, "You didn't tell me that though." So, and it's really difficult because of that, I feel, because I don't speak Spanish, oftentimes it makes me feel less of a Latina, and it made me feel kind of like my identity as a Latina was invalid because of that. But I know that's not the case, even though like, it could feel that way sometimes, and people do, like, I knew when I came to Colgate that these issues would persist, and that's why I did join Lasso, and I'm in LAD, and it like keeps me in touch with all the parts of my culture that I love and that I appreciate, and every part of it is just makes my identity like safe, I guess. And I know that my identity is as valid as anyone else here, anybody else that identifies as
Oh, I guess I had a similar experience. I grew up bilingual. I spoke Spanish all the time. I'm originally from California, and where I was, there were a lot of Spanish-speaking people, so I could practice that. But then when I moved to Colorado, in a predominantly white neighborhood and went to predominantly white schools, I kind of lost my Spanish because there was so much pressure to conform and to just be the same as everyone else. And then when I would be with my Latino family members, I would kind of be ashamed of myself because I did not speak Spanish and I felt embarrassed and really guilty. Now I realize like I shouldn't have, but I overcompensated and then I tried really hard to learn the Spanish language again, and I took lots of classes to try to learn the Spanish again. But even now, I don't speak it well. I do speak it enough, I guess. But it's kind of hard, being a Latina but not really speaking Spanish, and even though language is a big part of culture, at the same time it's not. You can be a Latina without having to speak Spanish.
Okay, so I'd like to move into a discussion of current events, if we can. I won't name any specific ones, but it's been kind of a big year for Latinos in the media. There's election news, there's been shootings, there's like political movements going on. Does anybody want to talk about any personal experiences with those opinions?
So yeah, this year's been crazy. It kind of breaks my heart too, because I know that it hurts me to see these things happening, but I know it also hurts other Latinos on this campus. Even though we don't say it or we don't show it. It's not that we don't feel it, it's just that it's not in our, I don't know. I had this conversation a few nights ago actually. Sorry, I'm tearing up, but it's okay. About like why don't Latinos ever speak up, and it's kind of an issue, and so I don't know, we never kind of resolved that conversation, but I'm using my voice now to do it. We as a world need to do better, and we as a country, and we as a campus, we as a community need to do better for Latino people in the world. One, there's hella anti-immigration, but it's not even anti-immigration, it's hella anti-Latino. It's not even immigration, it's anti-Latino movements. And there's issues with that, we need to stop putting people down just because they look different or seem different. Or not even you look different sometimes, they just seem different to us. They come from a different country, they're foreign, whatever. And we also need to make sure that we don't erase Latino identity. The Pulse shooting, which happened this summer, got quickly erased into, oh, it was a gay shooting. Like, no, it was a queer Latino shooting. It happened. It hit the Latino community hard. It hit me hard. I remember my friend texted me, like, did you hear what happened today? I was like, I can't do this today. And I literally shut down.
Yeah.
And I think those are important issues to talk about. And I'm gonna call out Colgate because I think Colgate does need to do better. When we say we need more POC representation and rights on this campus, we don't mean Latino, we don't mean other Asians, we don't mean Indigenous. And I'm calling y'all out because this is something we need to fix. When we say we need POC rights on this campus, I mean we need POC rights for everybody. We need to work on that. There's a lot of Latinos on campus who don't feel connected to things like to political movements on this campus or things of that nature, and who feel like their identities get erased on this campus constantly, or when our space gets taken over and we get moved. Low key, the original La Casa got taken over last year. I have issues with it because you literally displaced a people whose history has been that you've taken their land. And I don't mind the people in there now because I trust them, but there's still an issue with that happened. And so yeah, I think we as a community need to do better, and like there's a lot of issues that we just don't talk about and don't want to acknowledge, but they are serious and they are happening to us. And just because we don't speak it, actually, I'm gonna rephrase that. Just because you're not understanding it doesn't mean we're not saying it. If anybody else wants to touch on that. Sorry, I like have to get a lot out today. It's been a rough start to Hispanic Heritage Month. BAC, funding, contracts, all right.
Another thing that kind of like gets at me is the fact that how when Latinos come up on the news, it's only to discuss like negative things about it. Like only to discuss shootings, only to discuss how like Latinos influence the voting polls and how which presidential candidate needs to vet for the Latino community and population more to it. And so it's just very strategic and very negative. And so it's like I just wish that like there would be more talk about like the positive things about Latinos and like have constructive like shows about what its culture, various cultures are about and like what it represents and like have it talk about like the good things that it has supported, like that it's contributed to like the world and to America because there's just been so many like immigrants that have done so many great things in this country that I feel like it's an injustice to just only focus on the negative things. So that's another pet peeve of mine.
On documentation is like a big issue, especially just like not necessarily being undocumented, but what it means. Like in my community, for example, it was like elections, I think like a week ago or something, and a lot of people are kind of like, well, like I said, I'm from Puerto Rican Dominican neighborhood. A lot of people are not documented, live under in the shadows, and a lot of the times they don't get represented, like their voices, because they're not citizens. And it's very frustrating to hear on the news and stuff, especially with this political campaign, that take all the jobs that we want to feed off of food stamps and everything else. And the thing is, like, even my own family members and my own community members think that about themselves. Like, yeah, we are taking stuff. Like, we should be more grateful. Like, just these narratives that go around, and it's just like dehumanizing.
I guess before I was very naive and I thought like this world is a great place, but as I see more and more things on the media, I'm kind of like just disgusted and horrified by how much hatred and negativity there is in the world, and just like illogical hatred and negativity. And I just wish it could be better, and I want to create change, so it can be better.
Okay, so those are all the prepared questions that we have for today's panel. But I'm going to open it up to general questions from everyone in just a second. But first, I wanted to kind of like open up the panel to a forum for Latinxes like that are here today. So if anyone identifies as Latinx and wants to say something, comment on something specific, answer one of the questions I asked, or throw out another question, put your hand up and I'll bring the mic to you. If not, then I'll just open it up to general questions. We can also do both at the same time. So, okay. Yes.
I have a question, but I don't identify as Latino, so.
Go for it. You want the mic?
I guess it's open to like everybody. Well, okay, I want to direct this to like the Latinos identifying people. How do you feel? I want to make this like a joke, like a dictionary. It's not even a dictionary, but I'm just gonna ask it. How do you feel about like relations between like the Latinx community and other groups of color, or like other groups of color on campus, like in the campus area?
I'll go for that one. I know, yeah, I was like, I know you want to go for it. I think they could be better. They're not bad, I would say, or I don't want to say they're bad, but I think there's definitely some things that could be done better. Like I said earlier, when we talk about POC, we don't necessarily always mean POC. We just kind of use that as an umbrella term to kind of say, look, you're fighting for not just us, but the larger community. And yes, I believe in solidarity. Yes, I want that to happen. But I think solidarity is like a two-way street, or it's a web. It's not necessarily like a stepping stool. So I think definitely I want to like build better communities and kind of talk about these issues. And I want to say too that these issues are intermingled. A lot of what people have said today is that we've talked about a lot of anti-blackness in the Latino community, which there is. We're not going to hide it. You know, it's an issue. But I think that's something we're trying to work on together as a community and kind of push against that. And so I think that's something that communities in general, like people of color on this campus, should work together on. And I think, you know, it just takes conversations and it takes us constantly checking each other and being like, hey, I know that you mean well and you're not like doing this out of spite, but this is what's happening, this is what's hurting me. Can you help? And then the same way back, like, what's hurting you, what's out of spite, you know, tell us back to like, we're not gonna be like, oh, no, like, that's not how we are. We as a community want to grow and get better with each other. So if anybody else wants to.
I feel like a lot of times issues are divided between black and white, and we're just like kind of the other, like in the middle, struggling to figure out, okay, where do we fit here? Like not just us Latinx, but also Asians, also Native Americans, also other races, and Middle Eastern, and like it's very frustrating that I have to like kind of fit into one or the other. And I realized like on campus sometimes a lot, this is more speaking as a Latina, but I'll go to like parties and I'll see that it's only like certain types of music are played, and like Latino music is cool too, right? So like why don't I hear it as much? And I usually try to fight for that alongside my best friend. So yeah, that's just like one issue.
I think one of my critiques about being Latino or Latino-ness is the fact that it's there's like a whitening to it, and that really doesn't go like mentioned too often, because like across the Americas, like people, like as soon as you get like some whitening features, you kind of like disassociate with like the black community, and it's funny because it's just like we are just like such a mixture of people that's like contradictory to what we are in our histories. I mean, like Roxanne like talked about it before herself, where she like feels like where like people when like they mention Latino, they conjure like a specific image or specific skin tone or specific features, and it's just like people from Latin America can be like from literally any shade like possible, and so it's funny because a lot of our histories, dances, like genres of music, like instruments come from African like roots, and for that to go unnoticed and to go whitewashed is such an injustice for history.
So you mentioned this idea of Latinos, Latinx, identify people on campus being silent. So I literally like remember this moment of being in the faculty meeting when the idea was proposed for the new career center, and that they're going to have to move OUS into La Casa. And I blankly remember whoever was leading the talk said, "Oh, but don't worry, like we talked over it with the La Casa people and they're just fine." And because I immediately thought like, oh, you're going to take the La Casa house, but then as the thought entered my head, they're like, oh, but then we talked to them and they're totally fine. And so it's one of these things where it's like, well, if you don't, like, you just have to take people's word for it. And if the community is not in an uproar about it, well, okay, well, I guess everyone was fine with it. But then after hear you all say, like, well, no, actually, we weren't fine with it. So how can we, start bridging these gaps with our activism on our campus, to think about, to not just take people's word for it. Of course, that's one big thing. But then also, it's like if we don't know the issue, then how can we fight for it? So what do you think are some action steps that we can take to like bridge the activist community on Colgate University's campus so that things don't happen like, people's houses getting taken over? And no one says anything. Like it's not a march, it's not a protest, like it's not a candlelight visual. Like what can we do?
This is gonna sound really stupid, but come to the event first of all. This is partially blatant promotion for Last on Hispanic Heritage Month, but also blatantly like, I guess learn the issues. I mean, I'm not trying to be like, oh, like you do all the work. Like, I think meet us halfway. Like Lasso and ALST and a whole bunch of other groups on this campus, we try to do programming to like, this is what it is. Like, just come and show up, be supportive of us and that, and kind of understand that there's like limits to the. I think one thing that I find really kind of fucked up is that we have erased Spanish from Colgate in general, like Spanish as like an official language that people speak every day at home and stuff. I remember freshman year during SPW, I was talking to my friends. They're both kind of drunk, but it was a serious conversation because no, it's really serious. I remember both of them saying, you know, it's really hard to speak of in class just because, you know, we were taught they speak Spanish, their first or second language. They primarily speak in Spanish. So like going into a classroom and having someone speak so eloquently in English when they've been speaking out their entire life, and then you going in there kind of like speaking broken English. That's one thing. I think we have to understand that that's an issue as well, that people are at different levels in terms of how they can communicate with us because physical language barriers, like that's just a literal thing. So I think one, understanding the issues is one, and that goes into the language thing. Coming to our events and kind of saying, okay, what are things that you're concerned about? In terms of the La Casa thing, that was literally, no. I will shut that down right now. That was literally, they told us it was going to be moved, and then we just kind of had to like, okay, accept it. So, yeah, I think, again, it sounds like late promotion, but I think it's important to kind of at least meet us halfway. Like, we're putting on these events so that we can show you, like, these are the things and the issues that we talk about. These are the issues that we're facing. Kind of come meet us halfway and learn about it. But sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot too, so speak.
Questions?
Alright, so I'm gonna continue the conversation thread about the house because like I don't want to make it about it, but at the same time I think it's something where things can still be done. Like there's enough of a time frame. Especially considering when people are close enough. And I know you said that you trust OUS and First Gen and all of that, but like even the fact that I didn't even immediately think of that, like the fact that it moved, and then even I was just like, okay, like I honestly feel shitty about that. And obviously if there is like a property is connected to history and has been connected to history for a long time, history is strong. And as long as it stands, should stand to reason that we or, you know, a coalition of people can at least have that conversation and try to figure out some sort of like better arrangements. I don't know for that. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Well, one thing too that I try to do is like kind of refuse to call it OUS and First Gen House. I call it La Casa or like La Casa. I think that one, that just gives it power. Like that's what that space is. It is La Casa. Like no matter what you do, no matter who's in there, you know, that's what it is. And I think it's important just doing that. But I think I just don't know where to go from there. You know, I think that's a hard battle to fight. And I think when, as Latinos, we fight a lot of battles on this campus and kind of get swept under the rug. So it's hard to fight more battles than you're able to. If that makes sense. And so, if anybody else wants to jump in, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I don't know. We're trying to. I live in the new La Casa. That's what we call it. We're also trying to, since we've kind of been, we're trying to reestablish our presence as La Casa because since we're not living uphill anymore, we also don't want that one to be the only La Casa because we are actually living in the new La Casa. So it's a really confusing battle between like trying to maintain the integrity of the old house, also trying to establish a new presence in the new one and trying to like keep the identity that we had with that one previously without kind of taking it away from the old one too. So it's very
How is that new space? Do you want to talk about that? Did they like, at least transfer what did belong? I know
It gets worse.
Well, we were promised a sign that said La Casa, so that it's officially like a new La Casa. We're still waiting. We low-key still waiting.
I just like to comment on this. I know I'm supposed to say it, but I have something to say about this.
Beto also lives in
Yeah.
La Casa last year, so she has to.
Okay, so the house is the like old class of 1934 house, which you probably know that red house on the corner, which I just think is a little bit symbolic that they like moved us off campus, so now we're like looking out at the Colgate sign, which is kind of just odd symbol. But also we asked a couple people, we asked our CL of the house, we asked like higher powers at Colgate, can we get the sign taken off and of the old La Casa and moved to our current one? Can we add something? And they said, well, you can't take the class of 1934 sign down because it's history, it belongs to the house. Like that was the house that belongs to us too. So how is that fair? Also, there are things that are like nailed to the walls inside of old classes back when Colgate was men only, white only. And we said, can we take that down? Can we move it somewhere else? Can Colgate put it in one of their halls? No, that has to stay there. It's part of the house. So that is kind of a slap in the face to us on a very, very deep level.
So currently, like in the living room too, we literally have like all the records on the wall, and like we have the original, like it's like a photo, it's an old photo of La Casa, and it's like Lasso members have drawn, and we have like a Lasso's poster hanging. Like we literally try to decorate it as much as possible so that it's like becomes that space. So yeah, like there's issues with this house thing, and I think. Like I said, I just don't know where we can go from here because there is issues with it. But y'all want to help? Y'all know where we live.
I mean, again, I don't like I keep making it about the house, but like as a member of OUS, how do you think we can like respect that space?
That's kind of a hard question. Just honestly, I don't know how we can do it. The Lasso Corps has kind of decided a little bit that we would have meetings there every once in a while just to kind of remember it. But that sounds also kind of like really fucked up that we have to remember it. I don't know. Those are hard questions, and like I said too, like we kind of push it aside because we have we're students. Like we have that to deal with. We have home life to deal with. We have like being on this campus, which is hard to deal with. So it's just been like pushed to the side of it. It's still back there, but we just like try like it's hard. Sorry.
I teach Spanish on campus, and I have been connected with La Casa and Lasso since 1999. And I think I hear a lot of you asking about how can we help numbers. Join Lasso, seriously, because I actually was very close to the process of the switch from La Casa up the hill to down the hill. And in the conversation, we had a moment where we could have stopped it, but there wasn't enough student force to do it. And I remember one of the CLs telling me, maybe generations are changing and it's just time to move. And there were many parallel discussions where people also felt that to have a space on Broad Street would be also empowering. But I think the crucial thing here is numbers. I mean, join, be part, make this issue not just La Casa or not, but from history forward, make it more relevant by being part of it, all of it, because it's always the same 10 people. And just know that you will be very welcome. Yes, Lassie?
Yeah, we're on.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
I did the process, and it wasn't like a crushing battle. It really wasn't. I think nobody at that point just the forces were not there. And it seemed, and I as a professor kind of stepped back and I said, okay, this is what people say, then this is what people say. But I had been part of the other history of the casa for years. I used to take my classes, and I mean, we also thought, okay, then I guess it's going to be nice to have a bigger space. But I mean, I really want to bring this point to the rest of you, not necessarily to Lazo, like seriously. Go to meetings, spend the time, be part of a natural course where it's not 10 people trying to be 1,000 things at the same time.
Does anyone else have any questions or anything? That's a really good place to end, actually. Kind of so fun. No, but really, seriously, if you identify as Latinx, like, you want to be part of LASO, come talk to us, sign up tomorrow at the activities fair. If you don't identify as Latinx, but you want to be part of this cool community, come to our events, join LASO anyway. Be friends with us, or friends with us. And seriously, talk about LASO, join LASO, like, come out and support. We need that.
Make it your identity. You don't have, it doesn't have to be now. It could become.
Thank you so much.